After the long wait, many delays, people finally got to play Guilty Gear Strive's story. Finally get to see a conclusion to Soul Bad Guy's arc, Jacko's arc, and a very nice spot for Kai, and we got to see a hint at what's next for Happy Chaos. But it wasn't until actually after the credits rolled that fans actually realized that not all characters in Guilty Gear Strive that are playable were in the story. It wasn't until the actual ending credits of the actual story that we actually got to see them, along with other characters from Rev 2 that we also did not get to see. That is until DLC. We're not talking about that today, that's another video. But we only got fragments of what was happening to these characters during the entirety of Guilty Gear Strive's. This actually caught a lot of players actually completely by surprise, not getting to actually have every character in the story. In terms of narrative-wise, actually makes sense. Arc System Works actually before Guilty Gear Strive's initial launch actually showed a roadmap of the initial content that they have planned for Guilty Gear Strive. They showed off what months they actually want to release characters in, the actual updates and other content they were hoping to add to the game, but the major, most eye-catching thing, personally, Story 2. And that's actually what we're talking about today. What the hell is going on in the story for Guilty Gear Strive 2? Now, if you're not familiar with Guilty Gear Strive's lore, oh, fuck. You know what? Make the things easier, please. Just go check out WoolieVersus videos on the lore. It's just gonna make things a lot simpler. After the events of Guilty Gear Strive, a major thing is what will the actual story be about? Will it be a continuation? Will it be a side story? Will it be actually a prequel to this? What is it gonna be? So various obvious thing was there were characters missing from Guilty Gear Strive's first story. Who were the characters that were missing? The characters missing from Guilty Gear Strive's story were May, Rementhal Valentine, and most importantly, and the one we're actually gonna be talking about the most, Faust. So if you're not aware, Faust is one of the oldest characters in all of Guilty Gear. And I'm not talking about lore canonical age, I'm talking about he has been in so many fucking games. In the previous games, he's absolutely been much more happy and had much more upbeat demeanor than we currently see in Guilty Gear Strive. And we've had zero explanation for why he's had a much darker look in Strive. He used to be a doctor by the name of Dr. Baldhead before he took on the name Faust after things went wrong. It's a long fucking story, but throughout older Guilty Gear games, he's definitely been, without a doubt, more goofy. His moves have always been somewhat fun, and all the animations have looked amazing, but they've always been wacky moves. So I honestly think the story is going to be covering this about Faust. Another thing is too, I actually think they're going to be including Rementhal Valentine and May somewhere in this story. I think the story is going to take place with Faust actually working with the Conclave. Conclave has been a major antagonistic force in previous Guilty Gear titles, and we saw none of it in Strive. And the reason why I say Faust would be working with the Conclave and not someone else is, in the end credits of Guilty Gear Strive, they actually show off what some characters have been doing, and the shot we get to see of Faust is him actually with a member of the Conclave. Could be Faust working with the Conclave, maybe out of his own volition, or maybe not of his own volition. But I believe it's going to be Faust working with the Conclave for something. I'm going to say it's going to have absolutely shit to do with Happy Chaos and Eno's story. It's going to be its completely own entity. And I think it's going to actually have Rementhal and May, and possibly Potemkin, actually be the main protagonists. If we take a look at the opening cinematic for Guilty Gear Strive, we can actually see Rementhal obviously in it, and Rementhal played zero part in Strive. I think it's very likely to say that Rementhal will be trying to stop Faust and actually try and stop the Conclave. I'm also saying May and Potemkin would actually be probably part of this as well, just because in the exact same opening cinematic, we actually get to see multiple different shots of multiple characters on screen. All these characters in the opening cinematic, they have some sort of relation to each other and play an important part of the story. The ones that stand out the most are these four. There is no freaking reason to have these characters together when every other character makes sense. That is, unless they actually don't play a part in this story and play a part later in Story 2. I would not be surprised if we actually see these characters team up to try and stop Faust and the Conclave. Having Faust work with the Conclave, doing something evil, but having a very good motive definitely seems like something that is definitely plausible for Faust. It's crazy to see Faust being so dark and scary. You would absolutely assume there'd be a very good reason for Faust having such a dark appearance in Strive, and I think working with the Conclave is definitely likely. And if it sounds like I have not a lot of details, there's a reason behind this. When Arc System Works showed off the roadmap, they showed off which characters they wanted to release in what months. They said that for the month of July, they wanted to release a brand new playable character from Guilty Gear Strive. Talk about that later. And then the next month, they wanted to have a previously played character, and then later at some point, they wanted to actually have the story trailer 2 and the other 3 characters. This is very notable just because the way it was actually presented, having just a gigantic clump it's very, very likely that these 3 playable characters will actually play into the story. I honestly think we're going to get quite a lot more details closer to the actual story release, and I think we'll actually get to see the characters that will play a major part in the story. Now, it's extremely hard to tell which characters that are actually going to hoof in here, but if I had to take a wild guess, I think a couple likely characters would probably be something along the lines of, say, Sin, Dizzy, Johnny, and hell, they might even throw an Answer. And maybe Elfit. Johnny's pretty likely because he's such a huge character in all of Guilty Gear, and he does work with May, which is pretty likely to actually see. Sin is another likely character, being such a prominent character in the story, having relations to Kai, Soul, Remlethal, all of that. Same with Elfit. Goes pretty hand in hand, and I'm throwing Dizzy on top of that as well. I think it's very likely that these characters are going to end up supporting Remlethal and May and Potemkin in trying to stop Faust. Whether all of them will be playable, whether some of them will just be NPCs, whether some of them will actually have their own individual parts, I think it's very likely to actually see these characters in particular. I'm not sure they're going to be helping Remlethal look for a plot device, or they're actually just going to be strictly trying to stop the Conclave and Faust, but right now it's very early to tell what's going to happen in the story. But anyways, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Please leave comments down below what you think could possibly take part in story 2, if you think I'm right with anything with Faust. Anyways, thank you for watching. Please go check Twitter. Please go check Twitch. And just remember,